If you would turn to our scriptural text today from the book of Revelations chapter 3. I rarely preach from Revelation. I realize it's in the Bible, and these are times it looks like we're living out of Revelation days, and I felt that we should go to Revelations today. Chapter 3, verse 15 and 16 in the New Living Translation. Notice there these two verses. I know all things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you are like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Today I'm talking simply from this subject, check your temperature. Check your temperature. These words that we have just read in Revelations chapter 3, verse 15 and 16, these are the words of Jesus Christ written to the churches there in Revelations. He had a different message to each of the 7 churches of Revelation. These particular words were written to the church at Laodicea. And remember, John the Revelator is exiled on the island of Patmos when he hears these words of Jesus to the 7 different kinds of churches. And as I mentioned, these words are the particular words that he gave to the church at Laodicea. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily consider these to be words of good report. These are poignant words. They're pungent words. They are evaluating and judgmental words. Saying to the church at Laodicea, he said, you're lukewarm. I wish that you were hot or cold. And he says, I must spew you out of my mouth because you are lukewarm. And now you may not understand this, but I want to take you on a little journey to help you to understand the biblical context, because when we read things in the scriptures today, we read with a certain understanding of things in this part of the world where we live in America. But in other parts of the world, there's a different understanding. And I want to help you to understand how the people of Laodicea heard these words that Jesus spoke to them. Laodicea is an interesting place, and it's near this place in the scriptures that's called Hierapolis. I want you to notice how the Apostle Paul, writing to the church at Colossae, notice what he said in Colossae chapter 4, verse 13 through 16. He says, I can assure you that he prays hard for you and also for the believers in Laodicea and Hierapolis. Luke, the beloved doctor, sends his greetings, and so does Demas. Please give my greetings to our brothers and sisters at Laodicea and to Nympha and the church that meets in her house. And after you have read this letter, pass it on to the church at Laodicea so they can read it too. And you should read the letter that I wrote to them. I want you to notice this. This was their old-fashioned system of what I would call their internet or inner network. Now, this is what you call document sharing, ever before there was a Microsoft or a Google. The early church was engaged in document sharing. The Apostle Paul, writing to the church at Colossae, he says that what I'm writing to you, he says, I want you to pass these words on to the church at Laodicea so that they can read it too. And then he says, and then the letter that I wrote to the church at Laodicea, I want you to read their letter. This is a document exchange. This is document sharing. You see, God always has a way to be able to get his word out, to publish his word. And I'm so grateful to God for the power of the gospel that is not limited to technology. You have to use the technology that is available to you, because before we had television and telephone, we had telewoman. And that's why when Jesus rose from the dead, they were not men, they were women that went heralding the news that he is alive. He has risen from the dead. They had an old-fashioned system. But now Jesus is giving a message to the church at Laodicea here in the 3rd chapter of the book of Revelation. And understanding the geography of where Laodicea is, sort of slightly to the northwest of Laodicea is this town called Hierapolis. Hierapolis is known for its hot mineral springs. It is a place that perched atop a mountain there, just a few miles northwest here of Laodicea is Hierapolis, a place that has natural hot mineral springs bubbling up. And then a little bit to the southeast of where Laodicea is another place called Colossae. Colossae is known for its cold, refreshing springs of water. So here you have Laodicea that is perched in between the Hierapolis with their hot mineral baths, their hot mineral springs bubbling up atop the mountain, and then Colossae on the south end with their cold, refreshing waters. But Laodicea didn't have any springs at all, hot or cold. So the way that Laodicea got their water was through special systems of aqueducts, which was that they brought this water in underground channels to be able to bring it all of the way from Hierapolis, from the hot springs of Hierapolis, down to Laodicea where they were. There was another aqueduct from the south bringing the cool, refreshing waters from Colossae into Laodicea. But here's the problem. As the water came down the aqueduct from the hot springs of Laodicea, or from Hierapolis, coming down to Laodicea, what happened is that the waters cooled off. So by the time they reached Laodicea, the waters were lukewarm. And then by the time that the cold waters that came from the springs of Colossae reached also Laodicea, they were no longer cold, they were lukewarm. So you can understand now why Laodicea would understand these words that Jesus is speaking to them, saying, listen, Laodicea, you are lukewarm, and I wish that you were hot like Hierapolis or cold like Colossae. And because you're lukewarm, you see, lukewarm water has little use. Nobody wants to refresh themselves after a hard day of work with lukewarm water. And nobody who's trying to take a bath wants to take a bath in just lukewarm water. They wanted the hot water. So they needed the hot springs of Hierapolis. But by the time the hot water got from Hierapolis down to Laodicea, and by the time that the cold water got from Colossae over to Laodicea, the water was warm from both places. It had lost the very quality that made it special. And Jesus is saying, the farther that you have gotten away from me as the source, the more you have lost the very essence that makes you special. And he says, I wish that you were hot or cold. I wish that you had this thing where you were bubbly hot, that you were like a hot mineral spring springing up so that people could enjoy that. I've been to mountains and been in hot mineral spring baths, and I've been to cold springs, and I have seen and enjoyed the quality of those unique waters. It is amazing that here now Laodicea is just right in the middle. So that by the time they get the water, it was hot at the source, but by the time it came down the aqueducts to them, it was lukewarm. And by the time that the cold waters from Colossae got to Laodicea, the cold waters had heated up, and now they were lukewarm. And so it was just lukewarm, insipid water. And who wants to bathe in just the lukewarm water? They needed the hot water. And who wants to be refreshed by lukewarm water? They needed the cold water. And this is why Jesus is saying, I wish that you were either hot or cold. Hot or cold. And so it speaks something of God's desire for us to maintain a passion that we ought to have for Him at all times. But instead, the people of Laodicea, their discipleship was unremarkable. It was just so-so. They were used to doing things their way and not God's way. But I believe that God wants us to be hot so that people can feel the warmth, the passion of our love. I mean, whatever you do, you ought to do it with passion. It ought to be hot. It ought to be hot. Or if it's something that is designed to be cold, it ought to be able to refresh a person after they have been under the sweltering heat of oppression, the sweltering heat of poverty, the sweltering heat of sickness, the sweltering heat of struggle. You need to be refreshed with cold, refreshing water. But yet, Laodicea was just lukewarm. And if you're going to do something, do it with everything that you've got. Do it with everything that you've got. He says, I wish that you were either hot on fire, or I wish you were cold so that you could do what you're designed to do. You ought to do something that you're designed to do. Hierapolis was designed to be able to produce this hot water, and Colossae was designed to produce the cold water. They had respective springs to do what they could do that served their community. And that's what we're supposed to do. Whatever God has put in us, we're supposed to do that thing passionately. Put your heart into it. Put your heart into it. I mean, go hard or go home, And so you have to realize you ought to be hot. You ought to be hot for God. You ought to be cold in the things that He uses, that when things have gotten heated up and you need to bring the tempers that are flaring down, you ought to be like the cold, refreshing waters of Colossae. But when you don't have your temperament under control, and you're boiling over when you need to be able to keep your cool, to manifest the character of Christ. Because whenever you lose your temper, the devil finds it. Temper, heat, temper. You get hot-headed, because we don't have Colossae in us anymore, the cool, refreshing spring. You know when somebody says something to you sideways, and you need to have a Colossae spring in you, of cool, refreshing water. That's why he said, I wish that you were hot or cold, so that you could serve the environment, the community, with really what you need. I'm always struck by people who do whatever they do with passion. If you're going to play an instrument, play it with passion. I don't know about you, but I've been to the symphony and I love classical music and I love jazz music. But it seems to me that the folks that play jazz look like they're having more fun. Now, I don't know. I don't know. They just look like they're having fun. They just look like they are playing with passion. If you're going to sing, sing with passion. If you're going to dance, dance with passion. Whatever you do, if you're going to cook, cook with passion. Put your soul in it. Put your heart in whatever. If you're going to speak, don't just sort of just monotone, the Lord is good. Bless the Lord. Put your soul into it. It ought to have passion in it, hot or cold, because I've stepped into heated situation and it wasn't time for me to get heated because tempers were already flaring. And I'll just come in and just say, let's just take a look at this. Calm down. And your tone can give the signal for others to mirror, to come down and to match your tone when things are already heated. You have to know when you need to be a Hierapolis and when you need to be a Colossae. When you need to heat things up that have grown cold and when you need to cool things down that have grown too hot. And Jesus said, I wish that you were hot or cold. He said, or else I really don't have use for you. I'll spew you out of my mouth. He said, that turns me off. I mean, just yesterday, I saw a gentleman, and I went to the grocery store, and I heard him playing this glorious music. He had taken this his violin and his amplifier out in the parking lot of the grocery store, and he was playing some of the most beautiful music. The moment that I stepped out of the car, I heard this glorious music just playing. I went in and did my shopping. When I came out, he was still playing, still just playing beautiful music. I intentionally went out of my way to drive by him. And then once I got up close to him, I saw he had a sign. And his sign said, I've lost my job and I've got 2 children and I'm trying to feed them. And I need help. I had $80 in my pocket. I reached in and I let my window down and I gave it to him. I didn't know who he was. And I could tell after he opened his mouth and spoke, he spoke with a Spanish accent. But it warmed my heart that he wasn't sitting at home griping and crying because he had lost his job, which was his resource. And this is the message that I really drew out of that. That though you might lose a resource temporarily, though you might lose a resource, don't forget about your resourcefulness. he realized that he was a resourceful person, that he had a gift on the inside of him. And he was out there just exercising his gift with no guarantee that anybody would give him anything. But he realized that because his resource stopped, his resourcefulness didn't have to stop. You don't sing because people pay you. You sing because you got a song. You sing because joy is in your heart. He wasn't just playing just because he had an instrument and an amplifier. He was playing because he realized that even though I lost a resource, I have not lost my resourcefulness. And you have to always say, God, show me my resourcefulness. And I'm telling you, he was playing with passion like they were paying him $10,000 to perform in a concert. He couldn't have played any better. And yet he had no guarantee of anybody giving him anything. But I like the fact that at that moment, he was a Hierapolis for me. And he gave me hot water. And because he gave me what he had, I gave him what I had. And you'll be surprised that even if you lose your resource, don't lose your resourcefulness. Realize that God has made you a resourceful person. He has made you a resourceful person. So stay on fire. Come on and be a Hierapolis. Be a Hierapolis. And so much of this prophetic word that Jesus gave to John the Revelator on the island of Patmos, speaking to the church at Laodicea, it speaks so much to the modern day Christian church that we've been lukewarm, as it were asleep. But he's saying, I want you to be hot or cold. Be on fire about it. You know, the thing that you have to realize is that the opposite of love is not always hate. The opposite of love oftentimes is indifference. It is indifference. You'd be surprised. In Luke chapter 16, where you read the story of the rich man, Dives, and the poor man, Lazarus, who sat at his gates, and the dogs came and licked his sores, and he was hungry. And the rich man died and lifted up his eyes in hell. And he's able to look up and see Lazarus, who was a poor beggar on the earth, but now he's in the bosom of Abraham. He's with Abraham. Isn't it amazing? I want you to understand that in Luke 16, Dives, the rich man, didn't go to hell because he was rich. I believe that he went to hell because he was a hater of his brother, in that he was indifferent to him, because Lazarus sat at his gate, and in his indifference, Lazarus became invisible to him. He acted like he couldn't see him. And every day this man was at his gate, and he fared sumptuously every day, and a man was starving right in his view, and he did nothing about it. And now, see, his punishment, he didn't go to hell because he was rich. You know how I know that? Because Abraham, the Dives is in hell looking up into the heavens, and he's seeing Abraham. Abraham was the richest man of his day. So you got Dives, a millionaire, looking up at Abraham, a multimillionaire, and he's in heaven and he's on the earth, but it's because he made Lazarus invisible to him. He was indifferent to his pain. He was indifferent to the situation, and in his indifference, he made it where he didn't even see his brother. And that was the worst way of hating him, is for somebody not to even acknowledge that you exist, to pretend as though they don't even see you, so they don't have to be confronted with your pain, so that the bowels of their compassion don't have to be touched. But we're here to help one another. We're here to help one another. And the church today has the same condition of the Laodicean church. We have a case of this lukewarmness. I would almost call it the ish. Instead of being the full thing, that we're only characteristic of small elements of it. We're sort of Christian-ish. We are sort of prayerful-ish. We're sort of faithful-ish. We're sort of righteous-ish. And I want you to realize this, that one's level of spiritual commitment is often designated as hot, cold, or lukewarm. One's level of spiritual commitment is often designated as hot, cold, or lukewarm. Check your temperature. What's your spiritual temperature? Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you lukewarm? Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you lukewarm? Isn't it interesting that he says, I wish that you were hot or cold. I wish that you were hot or cold, that you either had it or you didn't. Isn't it amazing? Some of the folks have these infrared thermometers where they don't even touch you, but this infrared light can hit your forehead and bounce back and give them a temperature reading of you. They want to know your temperature. And I want you to know that there is a holy infrared coming from heaven, checking the temperature of your soul. What's your temperature? Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you just lukewarm? What's your temperature? Are you guilty as charged with being infected with the power of the gospel? Are you indeed a Christian? Or do you just have antibodies of it? So they give you a sample of it that keeps you from getting the real thing. What's your temperature? Are you reflecting that you are passionately ablaze with a zeal for the Lord? Because to be hot suggests that Jesus wants you to be filled with strong spiritual zeal. To be hot, of course, is preferable, but to be cold is equally preferable, because at least if a person is hot or cold, cold is still honest. If somebody hates your guts and if they are cold towards you, at least you would rather know. I would rather know where my enemies stand than to know where my friends sit. I need to know if you don't like me. I'd rather know that up front. The people that are most dangerous to you are those that I would call fake friends. They're like warm up to you. They only talk to you so that you arm them with ammunition for them to talk about you. It's amazing. And I just want to know, are you hot or cold? Are you with me or not? It's one of just defining so that you have clarity as to know, are you with me? Or do you have a Judas in the bunch? The one who's always around, the one that sees you, the one that tries to pretend on the outside, but on the inside, in their heart, they're just waiting on an opportunity. They're waiting on an opportunity. They have ulterior motives. They're with you, but they're not with you. They're with you just to waiting to see something. But I want you to realize lukewarm is a comfort zone. And sometimes the problem with that comfort zone is that the lines become deeply, deeply blurred as to what is compromise. But when you're lukewarm, you don't even realize that you need help. When you're lukewarm, you don't even realize that you need help because you think everything is okay. I know people who are in lukewarm marriages and they think that everything is okay. You're in a lukewarm relationship, but people want to be in a relationship that has passion, where you know that you're loved. You don't have to want to guess whether or not your mama likes you or not. You need to know that she loves you, that your father loves you, that your spouse loves you. You ought to know that. Lukewarm is like a Coke that has lost its fizz. It's like chewing gum that has lost its flavor. It's like a potato chip that has lost its crunch. Lukewarm is like weak tea. You can't fix weak tea. And no matter how much sugar you put in it, no matter how much lemon you put, you can't fix weak tea. Lukewarm is a song that has an unengaging melody and a non-memorable rhythm. Lukewarm. Lukewarm is it's like a rainbow with 50 shades of gray. Lukewarm. Lukewarm is a place of neutrality. It's a place of neutrality. When you are lukewarm means that you are the top of the bottom, but at the same time, you're the bottom of the top. Lukewarm is a place where you're the best of the worst, but you're the worst of the best. It's a place of neutrality. Whenever you're in neutral, you simply coast to the lowest point and you stop.
Thank you for watching Power for Living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner. We pray that this message has encouraged, equipped, and empowered you to live a more victorious life. Join us next time for Power for Living with Dale C. Bronner, where revelation is power. Power for Living.